Texas is a big state with an even bigger reputation. To get from one end of Texas to the other, you must travel around 800 miles. And all along those Texas highways, the unique spirit of Texas is palpable. The Lone Star State exudes a confident swagger. Most people have heard the popular refrain that everything is bigger in Texas, which brings us to a little-known fact. Texas may be home to the biggest tiger population in the world. Texas does not have tigers roaming the plains, but it does have a collection of private owners, sanctuaries, and zoos who, for a number of reasons, keep these wild animals in captivity. This is the story of the legendary Texas tiger.
So I started out in commercial mortgage banking, and I was on a business trip in San Diego, and I visited their zoo, and I realized that I would be happier shoveling animal poo than doing what I was doing. So I quit my job and went back to school for another degree, and then started working at a sanctuary. So at the Cleveland Amory Black Beauty Ranch, we have over 40 different species. We have primates from biomedical research in the pet trade. We have horses and donkeys, over 500 of them, that have been seized by local law enforcement or rescued from various situations. We have farmed animals that have been rescued from factory farming facilities. We have exotic hoofstock, deer and antelope that have been rescued from ranches. So we have a little bit of everybody, and we're able to provide proper care to a wide variety of species. So we currently have 3 tigers at our sanctuary, 2 males and a female, and because tigers are solitary in the wild, they have to be housed separately. We took in Alex, our youngest male, from private ownership.
Alex is one of our tigers. He is a Sumatran Bengal mix, and he has been here for 3 years now. Alex was privately owned and then seized by the authorities because he was a safety concern. Alex's previous home was a quarter of a mile away from a daycare, and the daycare would never let the kids out to go play because of a large tiger living right behind them.
Several years ago, I had actually done an internship at another big cat facility, and I had no idea places like that existed. I've always been fascinated with big cats, and I had an opportunity to go work at a facility. And when I got done with my internship, I really wanted to continue with this kind of profession. And I had met Brian Warner, who was starting the Tiger Missing Link Foundation, and he had 2 tigers and was doing more scientific studies, and started helping him with that, and started doing some of the administration and stuff and working with his 2 tigers. And as our name got out there, people from all over just started calling us and asking us if we could rescue. And we had the land out here, so I've always done some sort of rescue, and that was really my passion. And so we agreed to go ahead and start a tiger sanctuary.
Why the person gets their first cat, it's pretty personal to that individual. My wife wanted one. We met a lady that had cougars and lions, and my wife said, I want a lion, and I said no. And then she said, well, I want a cougar, and I said no. And she said, well, we're going to have some kids, and I said, how many lions do you want? And once he came along, we found out that there was a need for the placement of a lot of different types of cats: lions, tigers, cougars. At that time, you reported it to the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, and if you did it correctly, then it cost you a few $100 and you got your permit. And the state of Texas back in the 90s was mainly only concerned with indigenous wildlife, which would mean that a cougar would be regulated, but not a lion or a tiger. You know. When we first started about 20 years ago, there were a lot more tigers than there are now. There were a lot more tiger breeders than there are now, and that was what could be considered a tiger boom. As a matter of fact, you could actually go to the Dallas Morning News and buy a tiger out of the classified ads.
Really, people ask, why tigers in Texas, where do you get these animals at? People are so attracted to the tiger. And the tiger is kind of an icon that everybody can relate to. We see it on our cereal boxes and, the gas station and stuff like that. We have this connection with the tiger. And really kind of in the mid 80s to probably mid to late 90s, there was this big exotic animal boom. And the big exotics were your lions and tigers, especially tigers. Texas became known for like the tiger place. It seemed like there's been numbers out there thrown that there were 10,000 tigers in Texas and all these crazy numbers. And I think the reason is because there were at one time a lot of breeders and there were a lot of tigers in Texas. And one of the biggest thing is we have a lot of farmland around here. A lot of people live in rural communities. We have the land, we can put them out there. Believe it or not, tigers are pretty quiet, so it's pretty easy to have one and neighbors aren't gonna know about it. And there was a lot of money in Texas. There's a lot of wealthy people, and wealthy people especially like to acquire different things.
So unfortunately, exotic pet ownership is extremely popular. You can go online and buy a monkey or a big cat for a couple of $1,000s with no problems. And unfortunately, these people buy these babies, these cubs, because they're cute and adorable and they think they're going to make a great pet. Usually when they reach sexual maturity or after a few years and they become so large and so strong, is when people usually realize that perhaps maybe it wasn't a good choice to own this animal. And that's when they call sanctuaries. And unfortunately, we take in as many as we can, but we can't take in all of them.
Owning a tiger is perfectly legal in Texas. The state requires that you register your tiger and pay a fee not to exceed $500. Additionally, you must provide paperwork that shows you can care for the animal, house it safely, and have liability insurance. But enforcement of this regulation is generally left up to each individual county. There are 254 counties in the state of Texas, and many of them are not even aware of the law.
So we're in Henderson County, and when this regulation was passed, we went to our county officials to register our animals as per the law, and the county had no clue what the legislation was, and so we had to educate them on how to register our animals.
We have no idea how many of these cats are actually in the hands of private owners because they're more than likely not reporting them to the state, and that number could be anything.
They're predators. They're apex predators. That should say it right there. They do not belong in a cage. They're meant to prowl. They're meant to hunt, and they're not able to do that in captivity.
Anytime a private individual is thinking about getting a cat, whether it's a cougar or a lion or a tiger, they need to consider the fact that they're not going to stay cubs forever. They're going to eat a lot. They're going to tie you down as far as how long you can be gone from your home, the amount of money that it takes to house one properly. The cat that I'm concerned about is the one that's in the backyard in a 10 by 10, 5 foot tall chain link enclosure that they wonder where they're going to get the next 100 pounds of beef to feed the cat, or if they need medical attention, don't know have the facilities to take them to the vet.
There's really a lot that goes into just caring for these guys. It isn't throwing them in a pen and throwing them a slab of meat every day. There's a whole other aspect to it. We have to have special gauge fencing for these animals to be in so that they can't get out, and so it's structurally sound for their protection and for the public's protection.
These are potentially dangerous animals. They have natural instincts. No matter how good a relationship you have with an animal, it doesn't mean that they won't revert to those natural instincts based on some outside stimulus or factor. So we do not treat our animals as pets. We deal with them what's called protected contact, and we consider them, potentially very dangerous, and we work with them with that safety view towards it. We try to have as good a relationship with them as possible, but safety is paramount.
Most states have some type of legislation that either limits exotic pet ownership or bans it outright. There are very few states these days that have no type of regulations whatsoever. Texas is a very broad, generalized legislation in that area. Each county is responsible for setting up its laws or its regulations on how they want to handle exotic pet ownership. And so it tends to not be very effective, because if the county doesn't want to have anything to do with it, they can simply ignore the legislation.
We can pass as many laws as we want, but we have to be able to regulate it. And there has to be a plan in order to regulate these laws and make sure that they're being followed.
For many of these former pets, sanctuaries have become the last stop of their Texas journey. And while these sanctuaries are important, the big picture issue is that unless private ownership is better regulated, the need for these sanctuaries will continue.
And our job not only is to provide a house or a space for these animals that are no longer wanted, but as a community we need to educate the public on why this is not a good idea so they don't get purchased in the first place. What we strive to do is put ourselves out of business by not having a need for sanctuary animals any longer.